kind of like the Roy G. Biv, red, yellow, orange, those things. The bottom colors are more like red, orange, yellow, orange, green, yellow, green, things like that. For what we're doing for the monochromatic light to dark, you can use anything you like. I would maybe use something kind of in the middle, like a blue, a green, maybe not yellow, because it might be kind of hard to see that transition from light to dark. But for this one, you can use anything on this palette except for black and white, okay? Do not use black and white. We are very rarely ever going to use black and white for our projects and things in here, okay? I'm gonna do one more. All right. All right, so what we're going to do is you're going to look at your brushes. I've got a little pack for you. All right, so grab you a pretty good little medium-sized one. For what we're doing, it might even be kind of one of the bigger ones that you can see. I have one right there in front of me. I'm telling you, I got this like baby brain happening. So I think for what I'm going to be doing for my scales, yeah, I'm going to pick the biggest one that's in the pack. So I'm going to get this kind of little flat, kind of bigger one. Because if we had a teeny tiny one, we would be here all day. We're trying to kind of make this quick. On the back of your brush pack, it tells you kind of those different types of brushes and what they are. We're making little washes, and so this brush that I chose is perfect. It's a glaze and a wash brush. So I like using that kind of bigger one. When I put it back in the pack, I try to put it with the sticks first, handles, and I keep the hairs up so it doesn't hurt them. All right, so first step to starting my watercolor, I want to wake it up, right? I need to get some water on my brush first to do that. So I'm going to wake up my brush a little bit with some water, and I'm going to wake up my paint a little bit. So I'm going to get it good and wet on my brush, and then I'm going to come in and I'm going to wet my paint. I really like for my watercolor to start out looking kind of soupy. I want it to be really good and wet. When you see people that work with really like thick, yucky, sticky watercolor that's way too thick, it's because they're not using enough water. So even after I've woken it up, I'll go get even a little bit more and just really wet that paint. Then I'll even come over to my palette and just kind of get some excess off. Okay. So I'm waking it up. I just chose like a pretty like turquoise color. All right, so for our light to dark, we're going to start really, really light and try to get dark as we go, because remember, we're going to layer, okay? So for my lightest layer, I need it to be almost the white of the paper. I need it to be as light as possible. So how am I going to make sure to get things really light? Maximum water, right? Like the most water possible. Can you mind grab me if I try this? Thank you. All right, so the maximum amount of water. So that means that I might even want to take that little bit of paint I put over on my palette, and I might really like go clean my brush and wet it up, and then I just kind of go back into all that paint that I put over here. Thank you so much. When you do this, like when you kind of transfer your paint to another spot, instead of trying to work in the well where your color is, it helps you really kind of be moderate with that paint. You're not like trying to like struggle and trying to use a little bit less as you need it. You could even possibly use this for a very light wash, because all it is that blue that I used. So I'm wetting my brush. I'm getting a tiny little bit of that pigment in from the side of it. And you can just watch me if you want to rather than start. It's fine. All right. I'm not going to wet my paper first. We're going to do lots of things like techniques where it's going to teach you wet on wet and things like that. But this is just teaching you literally how to put it on your paper. So I feel like it's pretty light. I can even kind of test it up here. That feels pretty good. All right, so I'm going to work quickly and try to get on both sides of my brush. So this is kind of how quickly I'm working, pretty fast. Now washes can be lighter if you wet your paper first, and you can try that on your scale. I didn't do that. Now you can lift as well. So if you feel like you got a little bit too dark, you can kind of pat it and lift it. What do you probably not want to do that might hurt your paper? Like rub it, right? Because it's going to kind of peel it up. So you don't ever want to really rub your paper too much. That's why I patted mine, okay? So for my next step, I might do the same thing I just did. I like trying to go dry onto my watercolor paper if I'm trying to get a specific value, because when I wet the paper and then I wet it again, it's like I feel like I can't control anything. It feels kind of like it's got a mind of its own. So I try my best to try to just kind of plan out what value is going to be next. So for the second one, because I'm layering, I'm going to try to do the same thing I did, and then I'm going to let it dry, and then I'm going to get it a tiny bit darker. So I'm going to try to go and do the same thing I did, and I'm working kind of fast. Why do y'all think I started at the bottom of my little shape rather than the top? I didn't want it to bleed, that's right. And I try to move my brush the same way the whole time. Patting it also kind of helped it not bleed as much. And I mean, it's the same value, so it's not going to matter if it bleeds a lot. But with your scales, you're really trying to get it clean. You're trying to get it neat. So this is my second one where I haven't patted it. This is my top one where I have patted it. I might just leave it, because I mean, it's supposed to get darker anyway. So I might just see if I like it that way. Okay. So I'm going to let it dry for a second. I try to move it quickly and just kind of scooch it over and over. I try to kind of move it. You can even touch it a teeny bit with that paper towel and just kind of go back over and clean it up. And that's not the end of the world when it comes to your scales. But sometimes people don't like that. Okay? So I kind of see it naturally getting a little bit darker as I go. It might be time for my next one just to scoop a little bit more. And by scoop, I mean I wet my brush. I kind of put it into my really wet paint, and I'm adding a little bit more dark paint over into my well. A well is like your little hole in your palette where your paint goes. I'm going to super wet my brush because I did add a lot more. And for scales, I kind of like to do one box at a time and kind of see how dark it's getting, and then I'll go back and layer if I need to. So we can always get darker, but it's kind of harder to get lighter. So the darker your wash is, the more streaky it will show up. So that's why I'm kind of going pretty quick. When I make washes over over kind of smaller areas, I don't mind going different directions sometimes, as long as I'm trying to kind of cover everything up. And I might pat it now because it's getting a little bit dark kind of compared to how I like it. But you can see how when you cover it up with that paint, it kind of starts to work a little bit better. So I'm starting to get light to dark a little bit more. This is going to be you just kind of playing around and figuring out kind of how to get it light to dark. So much of it is just kind of teaching yourself as you work. Okay? All right. Do y'all have any questions about this one? You don't have to start on the right with this. I don't know why I did. I think because I'm right-handed, so I just ended up over there. And then when I do the other one, I might flip it and do the other side. Okay? All right, so I'm going to let y'all work on this one for a few minutes, and then I'll come back and I'll show you intensity, because this will take you a minute, okay? Yeah, that's probably funny. Yeah, if we need more, we'll put more in there. All right, let's get it. Yeah, that's fine. I think most people are doing black anyway. So each one should look different. Should get super dark at the end. Alright, so I'm going to move on to the intensity scale. I'm going to flip it this way since I'm right-handed. I don't want my hand getting in my paint that's a little bit wet. So I haven't gone back to this in a minute because I'm letting it kind of dry some. Clearly I need to do another layer on here. With your intensity scale, I would still water down your paint pretty well so that you're not just using up all that paint in there. So I usually just try to wet my brush, get my paint soupy, and I put a little bit over in my well. I have lots of blue paint going, or blue water going, because I was using blue paint. So since I already was using turquoise, I just went ahead and did blue and orange. So I'm going to clean out my water since I'm moving on to orange, because I just want it to be kind of fresh when I start my orange. And looking back, I probably just could have done my blue first and then the orange, but it's fine. Alright, they're going to mix up anyway. Alright, so I'm going to wake up my orange. Remember, I'm just using those top colors because they're kind of more of that true. Mr. Ingram's mixing up some ceramic stuff for us. That's what all the tapping is. Like a little Nickelodeon orange, it feels like. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to start on one end with just pure color. So I'm starting off with my orange on one end, and on my other end I'm starting with my blue. And I'm going to work pretty quick so that you can't see my lines, so it feels just like a wash. You remember from painting one, wash is when you're just adding wet paint over an area to make it solid. Lift up a little bit. I'm trying to make sure that my paper towel doesn't have any blue in it where I'm lifting, because I don't want any blue in my orange at this moment. Okay. Got a good bit of orange there. Alright, because I'm going to work to the middle, I want to keep doing orange, and every time I work to the very middle one, I guess it'd be number 4, I'm going to add a little bit more blue on top. So I'm going to take the same amount of orange all the way to the middle, but every time I go to the middle, I'm going to add more blue. So I'm going to tell you what that looks like. I always try to wet my brush before I go into my paint over here. I want it to try to be the same value. I'm trying to be mindful that my very top color is a little bit wet. I'm trying to work kind of quickly, try not to let them bleed too bad. One thing that helps me is I try to be light-handed with my paintbrush. I try not to let it scrub my paper. Even if you're trying to like get really dark values, like it's not really going to help you get it darker if you press harder like with a pencil or something. It really keeps things a little bit neater for you if you work that way. I'm going to leave my very middle one empty because I want to do them more at the same time. I want to use orange and blue at the same time. So y'all know with complementary, you're not just picking 2 random colors. Orange and blue, yellow and purple, or what else? Red and green, that's right. So again, I just did this because I'm waiting for my other side to dry. Alright. Something that helps me work more quickly too is since I have a lot of orange water and I don't really want to stick it straight in my blue and get my blue nasty, I always wipe off my brush after I do things. It just kind of cleans it again. Though I will need a little bit of that water. It's not too orange. It's not saturated enough to really mess with anything. I'll just get a little more blue in here. See how fast I'm working? I'm trying to work quickly to kind of keep everything wet. Alright, so I'm going to scoot to the bottom, leaving the middle empty. I'm going to put down my blue. I'm already noticing that it's kind of light, so I'm going to work quickly to add a little bit more. Watercolor used to drive me nuts. It was like this mystery I could not figure out. And I think the reason is because I'm a very fast worker. I like to work quickly. I like to see results really fast, which is not a good really trait to have all the time in art, because we know that we don't see results quickly a lot. I get very impatient. But what I love about watercolor is that it really, I don't know, it's like the more you practice it, you really do kind of see yourself get better at it. And you just really got to kind of pay really close attention. If y'all have had me, y'all know I struggle with attention a little bit. My attention goes in different places. But it really does kind of train you to have to pay attention to what you are doing at the moment. So if you have to not talk, if you have to definitely like not look at your phone, you can only kind of do this in the moment and really paying attention to what you're doing. I had a little bit of orange stuck in my brush, so all I did was wipe my paper for just a second to get it off with the paper towel. So I'm doing blue. I was working very fast and it ended up kind of flicking my blue into my other blue spots, but they evaporated, so it was fine. It didn't really do much damage. Okay, so I've got my 3 orange ends and my 3 blue ends. I have to keep opening up my paper towel, make sure I got a clean spot. I'm going to feel my orange. It feels okay. I think we're ready to go. Alright, so I'm going to keep orange just like it is at the top. I'm going to start on the second one. I'm going to layer blue on top, so I'm going to get a little more blue out of my pan. And I'm going to try to do a pretty light wash of blue. Like I'm going to try to do lighter than I used on the scale already. So I'm really watering it down, and y'all see I kind of go to the corner of my paint. I try not to work right in the middle. This is keeping it really, really light. So this is showing me how colors can kind of layer. This is called a glaze, when you very lightly add a color on top of another color. So it's kind of tinting it. So this would be a way that I could maybe, and that's really drastic, add a little bit too much blue for my taste, but it'll change slowly. I don't want to do too much patty. If I'm painting something like oranges, or I don't know, anything that might have a little bit of orange or red in it, I could tint it and make a shadow with that, make it a little bit more natural. Alright, I'm going to take a little bit more blue. I'm going to use a little bit more this time since I've already used a good bit there. Use a little bit more this time. It's not really doing much, so I'm going to add a little bit more. So I can see it kind of gradually changing. So it's kind of starting to dull down that orange. It's cooling it off. Orange is a warm color, blue is cool. We're trying to cool that color down. So that could be really pretty for like a sunset color or something, that orange with blue on top. It's very different than if you took orange and blue and mixed them together and then put it down. So that kind of lets you see how they work. So I'm going to do the same thing with the orange. I'm going to start in the second one, add a little bit of orange, add more orange as I go. Okay. For my very middle one, I'm going to get a little bit more of each color in my palette. So I'm going to get a little bit more solid paint, which means I'm just wetting my brush less as I put some in my palette. Put it over here. I'm going to go ahead and prep all my colors so that I'm not trying to scramble when I'm layering them, though they have to dry a little bit. And when I do the middle one, I do the light one first. So I do light to dark. So on this one, I'm using a pretty good amount of orange. And I would probably do this after you've done your other side so that you can see what goes in the middle. But I just want to go ahead and show y'all this so you can be working on it. Ooh, I need to be working quicker. Getting streaky. Like I said, if you don't wet your paper, it's easier to control, but sometimes you see those streaks worse. So I've got a good bit of orange. I'm going to let that dry. I'll put the same amount of blue on top. And so it'll be like a perfect mix of both ends. Think y'all got it? All right, we'll let y'all get rolling. And if you immediately see that you got it way too dark right off the bat, I just try to kind of thin it out. Just like I did. I try not to panic. We can usually fix most things. It just kind of means you got to work quickly and kind of make decisions really fast. I think y'all can get quiet. All right, so what we're going to be doing for our grid, instead of layering like we were for our scales, this time we're going to be mixing. So we're going to start with, again, just those little top colors, everything but black. So all these top colors, red to orange. And these come out, y'all, like these little pan sort of things. So if you're someone who likes to work left to right, like if my paper, like my scales are going left to right, I would rather my colors be going left to right. So that's just like my little preference that I like. So what you're going to be doing is you're going to be looking at your top and side colors. So obviously you're going to kind of look down, and red, you're only going to use red. Orange and orange, you're only going to use orange here. When you're working from the top side, you're going to be using a little more of that top color. So that's kind of how this is going to be working. So I'm going to wake up my red because I haven't had to use it at all. So on this scale, or not scale, but on this grid, I'm going to really be kind of working to stay inside my lines. What I'm doing when I go off of the screen with my brush is I'm actually trying to get some of this off of my brush because I had way too much pigment on there. And I wanted to absorb a little bit off of there. So basically, whatever side you're closer to, you're using more of. Okay? So I'm in the red line here. I'm going to use more red when I mix with these colors up here. So I'm going to go down this little line, and when I'm using red, I'm going to mix a tiny bit of orange in there. So I'm going to go ahead and scoop some red out, but I'm really, really wetting it. I'm going to come put it in a little area over here, just where I got some room. So it's about 2/3 red, 1/3 orange. Gosh, I'm messy when I paint. I go too fast. That's my problem. Especially when I'm trying to show folks. Alright, so I used some red, and I put a little drop of orange in there. I'm going to clean off my brush because I like it all to kind of feel pretty good. Alright. I'm going to kind of test it to see if it actually looks different. It does not. I'm going to add some more orange. So I'm adding a little bit more red than orange just to kind of test that color out. And I'm going to place it in the next one. So I'm using that color that's on the left. I'm using a little bit more of that in there. Spreading it up. It may help me, I've just had this brush in my hand for like an hour. It may help me to use a different brush, maybe a little bit smaller. I still like a flat brush when I'm working in a rectangular or a square area because it gives me good crisp lines. So next I'm going to mix some red and some yellow. I end up using a lot of my palette for this, a lot of my mixing palette. So I'm going to put red down first since I'm using more of it in my palette, I mean. I'm going to come wake up my yellow. I'm making sure my brush is really, really clean when I go into my yellow. I need to be able to see things more. Alright, so that's yellow and red with a little bit more red in it. So you can see those colors starting to change. Because I'm not leaving all this water on this area, I'm kind of like picking some up with my brush and scraping it up and putting it on my paper towel. Things aren't bleeding quite as badly. So that's like a little tip for you. You can also skip around if you want to. That's something you can do. I was just going in order just because I was already here. But I would stay with the same color in your row for a while. Okay? The reason why we use more of that color that's the line that we're on is because, say like next we're going to go to orange after we're done with the red row. Now I can use more orange than red, and it's going to make a different color than this one. Does that make sense? So we can kind of like alternate how colors mix. That way we end up getting 8 times 8, 64 different color combinations, right? So that's going to kind of teach us what our colors are going to be looking like. So I always want to use, starting with that left, more of that color than the top. So I'm going to use more red than green, more red than blue. I'm going to get down here, I'll use more blue than red, more blue than orange, more blue than yellow, and so on. Okay, that's just kind of how you can remember, okay, I need more of that than that. So more red than green. And now you can start to see if we did the bottom colors too, it's like we'd never leave. We'd be here forever making a grid, forever and all eternity, because that'd be a lot of colors. So I'm going to wake up my green. I've been using the same dirty water for a while. I'm somebody who really likes to change their water frequently because I don't like my colors getting messy. But it's really not messing too much up here, especially since I'm using very light colors. Ooh, I love red and green together. Ugh, it's so pretty. It's like a maroon because it darkens that red. Mr. Taylor says when I make that noise, I sound like Lumpy Space Princess. I go, ugh. He goes, okay, Lumpy Space Princess. Alright, so that would be my red and green together. And then I keep on moving. I know I haven't years. Then I add my blue. So I'm adding maybe like a third blue, 2/3 red. And I can kind of tell, and y'all will start noticing, like, okay, it looks a little more blue than red, so I probably need to put my red back in there. Just taking time. This is really teaching you not only what's on your paper, but what's on your palette. It's really teaching you those colors. Letting you see how they work. The more we use watercolor, the more we really want to mix colors. True painters that paint realistically, they really do mix all their colors, y'all. They really don't use colors straight out of the tube. When they want a purple, they make their purple. When they want black, they mix all the colors together. I've told some of y'all when I took painting 1 at VSU, we spent 2 weeks and the classes were 3 hours long and we had them twice a week. So I spent, what was that, 12 hours? I spent 12 hours just making black out of the primary colors. Red, yellow, blue. We just made black out of oil paint for 3 hours. Twice a week. And you remember doing that too, I bet. Well, no, did y'all do that? Oh, you didn't?
Yeah, I was talking about that in the paper.
Oh.
And he recommended me to take painting classes.
How'd you not have to take a painting class? Did you take Occam's Media?
No, it's just that I guess with BA, did you get a BA or BSA?
I got a BFA.
Okay, so I think.
So you don't have to for BA?
Yeah, for a BA.
That's crazy.
Choose which pathway you want.
Wow.
This is considered like a pathway. So they have to have like, I'm not sure exactly where they're all signed on.
That's wild.
But like, for us, you actually had to take like the basic courses, complete all the basic courses.
Yeah.
And then you had to complete like 3 or 4 like different connecting courses. Like,
oh, okay. Yeah.
But you get to choose.
Man. That's crazy to me. Well, that's what we had to do. We had to make value scales, and we just literally made black. And he'd come over and he'd go, black's too purple. And then he'd come over and go, the black's too yellow. Now the black's too red. Now the black's too this. And we just make black forever, for hours and hours. I talked to Mr. Edward about everybody. He said that's completely fine. It's kind of cool that like you kind of knew almost. Now you kind of like interested in painting. You kind of do it on your own.
Have you ever thought about it? It wasn't that he was like, but he didn't even take a painting course.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried to thought about doing painting? Kind of shied away from it because it was a wet media. So I was going to like try it.
I will say the thing I wish I had more of when I took college art classes was I wish I had more stuff like this, where people would sit down and show you stuff and help you and kind of just let you like practice stuff, because they really kind of treat you like you already